The rain poured down in sheets, soaking the dirt roads of the small countryside village. Thunder rolled through the hills, and the night sky flashed with streaks of lightning. Most houses had shut their doors tight. Lamps dimmed early, and no one dared step outside, except for May. She held her shawl tightly over her head as she rushed up the path from the local herbal shop, a basket of dried roots in one hand, her shoes already soaked through. As she turned the corner toward her home, a strange shape caught her eye. Lying in the mud, half hidden by tall grass, was a man. May's breath hitched. She approached slowly, heart pounding. Hello. She called, "Are you hurt?" No response. She knelt beside him, noticing his pale skin, wet hair plastered to his forehead, and torn clothing. His lips were cracked. His breathing was shallow. He looked young, maybe late 20s, but his body was trembling from cold and exhaustion. She hesitated only a moment before sliding her basket aside and placing her hand on his shoulder. He flinched, but didn't open his eyes. "I can't leave you here," she whispered. With effort, May pulled him to his feet, draping one of his arms over her shoulder. He was heavy, and her steps were slow, but she didn't stop. It took nearly 20 minutes to drag him to her cottage, a small wooden house near the edge of the village. She kicked the door open and brought him inside, laying him carefully on the floor near the fire pit. His eyes opened briefly, dazed, unfocused. "You're safe now," she murmured. She removed his wet clothes and covered him with dry blankets, lighting the fire and boiling water as fast as she could. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the sense that something or someone had just changed her life. He didn't speak that night, only slept, and May stayed beside him, checking his fever, wiping his brow, whispering soft reassurances to a man she'd never met. In the quiet of her little home, with the storm raging outside, she told herself this was temporary, just a stranger in need. But deep inside, something whispered otherwise. This wasn't just a chance. It was the beginning of something far more complicated than she could ever imagine. The sun peeked timidly over the hills, casting a soft golden glow through the small cottage window. Birds chirped in the distance, but the room remained still, quiet, fragile. May sat on a stool beside the bed, watching the stranger's chest rise and fall. His fever had broken in the early hours, and now he slept more peacefully, his body no longer trembling. A bandage wrapped around his forearm, where she'd cleaned a deep cut. She didn't know his name. He hadn't spoken a word, but somehow, she already felt responsible. She stood and moved to the kitchen, preparing a light porridge. The scent of ginger and rice filled the house. When she returned, she found his eyes open, tired, confused, but awake. "You're safe," she said gently, placing the bowl on the table. "And you eat." He tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. She handed him warm tea. He sipped slowly, eyes flickering to her face, studying her without expression. "I found you on the road," she explained. "You were unconscious. I brought you here." He looked around the room, then down at his bandaged arm. "Thank you," he rasped. His voice was deeper than she expected, calm, even polite. "What's your name?" she asked. He hesitated, then said, "Li Wei." It sounded practiced, but she didn't question it. Mai. A pause lingered between them. She helped him sit up and eat, supporting his back with pillows. He winced as he moved, but said nothing about the pain. The days passed slowly. He remained in the bed for the first week, barely strong enough to sit without help. May tended to him every day, changing his bandages, reading aloud from old books, offering quiet meals by the window. At first, he spoke little, but gradually, he began to ask questions. "What is this place?" "Just a village," she replied, "quiet, peaceful, forgotten." "And you live here alone?" "Yes." No further questions. No judgment. Each day she noticed small things. How he always folded his blanket neatly. How he stared into the fire longer than necessary. How he avoided mirrors. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, she heard him whisper in his sleep. Names she didn't recognize. Words in a language she couldn't place. But she said nothing. He didn't remember much, he told her. Just that he was running. From what, or whom, he didn't say. She let him keep his secrets. For now, but deep down she wondered. What kind of man was Lee, way before the road, the storm, the collapse? And why did his silence feel heavier than any truth? By the third week, the cottage no longer felt like May's home alone. Li Wei had regained most of his strength. Though still quiet, he moved through the house with cautious ease, folding blankets, sweeping the porch, even helping her fetch water from the well. His injuries were healing, and so, it seemed, was something else, the distance between them. One afternoon, the rain finally stopped, and the sun poured down on the little garden behind the house. A forgotten space, overgrown, with weeds and wildflowers. May stood holding a watering can, the sleeves of her blouse rolled to her elbows. "Have you ever gardened before?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Li Wei leaned against the wooden fence. "No, I never had time for things that grew slowly." She smiled. "That's a shame. The best things in life take time." She handed him a small trowel and showed him how to loosen the soil around the plants. He knelt beside her, careful and observant, as if memorizing every movement. For a long while, they worked in silence. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. He planted a row of new seedlings, while she trimmed away dried leaves from the mint and green onions. At one point, she laughed when he accidentally splashed mud on his shirt. He gave a rare, genuine smile, faint but real. "I guess I'm not good at this," he said. "You're learning," she replied. "That's enough." They sat beneath the old cherry tree afterward, sipping tea she had steeped with ginger and lemon balm. The breeze was soft. The air smelled like earth and blossoms. "Why are you helping me?" he asked, suddenly, not meeting her eyes. She paused. "Because I know what it's like to be left with nothing." Li Wei's eyes darkened, but he said nothing more. Instead, he reached into his pocket and handed her something, a small, folded paper crane made from an old receipt. "A thank you," he murmured. "I don't have much." She held it gently, touched more than she expected. "It's perfect." That evening, as the sky turned pink and gold, May watched him from the window. He stood alone in the garden, one hand trailing through the tall grass, his eyes distant, his jaw tight, as if he were holding on to something unseen. She wondered, again, who this man really was. Because the more time they spent together, the more she feared that his silence wasn't from pain, but from hiding. It was nearly midnight when May woke to the sound of wind rattling the window panes. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. The room was still, but something felt off. She pulled her shawl around her shoulders and stepped quietly from her bedroom. The door to the guest room was open. Empty, her heart skipped. Then she noticed the faint glow coming from the main room. She walked slowly, bare feet silent on the old wood. Li Wei sat at the small table by the fire, his back to her. He didn't move, but his head was bowed low, and in his hands he held a photograph. A single, worn photo, creased, water-stained, and clearly cherished. May stood in the doorway, unsure whether to speak. Then, his voice broke the silence. "She had a smile like sunlight," he said softly. "Warm, dangerous." May stepped closer. "Is that someone you loved?" He didn't answer. She moved around the table slowly. Catching a glimpse of the photo, a woman with long dark hair and kind eyes. Standing beside a man in military uniform, Li Wei quickly slipped the photo into his pocket. Their eyes met. And for the first time, May saw it, the storm he carried beneath his calm. "Who is she?" she asked gently. He looked away. "Someone I failed." The room went quiet again. May sat across from him, waiting, not pressing, letting silence fill in the spaces words couldn't reach. Finally, he spoke. "There are things about me you don't know. Things I haven't told you. Because once I do, you might wish you never met me." She didn't flinch. "Try me." He clenched his jaw, emotions warring behind his eyes. "I wasn't always Li Wei." Her breath caught. He stood suddenly and walked to the window, staring into the dark. "I used to be someone else. Someone with power, a name, a life that cost too much." May's hands trembled slightly, but she didn't move. "Then, why come here?" "Because I needed to disappear. And because, when I saw your kindness, I realized I wanted to be someone different." She stepped toward him slowly. "You don't have to be afraid of who you were." He turned to face her. "But what if who I was still lives in me?" A long pause. She reached out and placed her hand gently over his. "Then start by being honest. With me, with yourself." His fingers closed around hers, hesitant, fragile. "I'm trying." She nodded. "That's enough. For now." They stood together in the quiet, shadows dancing around them, the fire flickering low. But neither one noticed the suitcase hidden beneath the floorboard, where the truth waited, silently. It was a rainy afternoon when May noticed something unusual. She had moved the carpet to clean the floorboards. Beneath the bed in Li Wei's room, something she hadn't done in months. As she slid the old trunk from the corner, her fingers brushed against a slight gap in the floor. A loose board, curious, she pried it open gently. What she found wasn't dust or forgotten tools. It was a suitcase. Sleek, black, hidden. Her breath caught. She hesitated, every part of her telling her to close the floor and walk away. But her hand moved on its own. She opened the case. Inside, everything contradicted the man who had shared her home for nearly a year. A tailored suit, a luxury wristwatch, 3 passports, each with a different name, but all with the same photo. Li Wei's face. The documents she couldn't fully understand. Contracts sealed. Envelopes with foreign emblems. A sleek black card with a corporate logo. Her fingers trembled. And then, oh my God, wrapped carefully in cloth. May stumbled back, the weight of it all sinking into her chest like ice. Who was he? What had she let into her life? The front door creaked open. Li Wei was back early. She shoved the suitcase back into the floor, slammed the board closed, pulled the rug over it, and tried to steady her breath. When he entered, carrying 2 bags of vegetables, he paused. "Are you okay?" he asked, sensing her tension. She forced a smile. "Just tired. Rain makes the house feel heavy." He nodded, watching her closely. Her heart raced. He knew something. Or maybe he always had. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, the rain tapping against the window. Every creak in the house now feeling like a threat. She kept thinking about the photo he had hidden, the names on the passports. Had he been running from something? Or toward something? And why had he never told her the truth? When morning came, Mei stood at the kitchen window, watching Li Wei tend to the garden as if nothing had changed. But everything had. She had cared for him when he was weak, vulnerable, unknown. And now, she didn't know if she had protected a broken soul, or sheltered a man capable of breaking hers. The wind stirred the trees behind the cottage as the sky turned to amber and rose. The hills bathed in warm light, but Mei's hands were cold. She had waited all day, watched him plant radishes, feed the chickens, brew tea, pretending nothing had changed. But everything had. As the sun began to sink behind the ridge, Mei walked to the top of the hill behind the house, a place where silence usually brought her peace. Not tonight. Tonight, it carried the weight of unanswered questions. And then she heard him. Footsteps behind her. She didn't turn. "I knew you'd follow," she said quietly. Li Wei approached slowly, stopping a few steps behind her. "You've been different," he said. "Since yesterday?" She faced him then, her eyes sharp, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Tell me your real name." Silence. He blinked once, slowly. "No more lies." A beat passed. Then, he sighed. "Chen Hao." The name hung in the air like smoke. "Who is Chen Hao?" she asked, though part of her already knew. He looked at the horizon, avoiding her gaze. "A man who spent years doing things he's not proud of. Working for people who don't forgive mistakes." Mei stepped closer. "And what did you do?" His jaw tightened. I disappeared, because I couldn't live with what I'd become." Her voice cracked. "And you let me care for you, feed you, trust you, without telling me the truth. Because the truth could have gotten you killed." She flinched. He reached into his coat and pulled out something small, the paper crane he had once folded for her, soft, delicate. "You made me feel human again," he whispered. "And I was afraid that if I told you who I really was, you'd see the monster I tried to leave behind." She took the crane, her hands trembling. "And yet you brought it here. The past, the lies." He dropped to his knees. Not dramatic. Just defeated. "I don't expect forgiveness. But I won't run anymore." She looked down at him, at the man she had once bathed, fed, healed, trusted. The man she had almost loved. "You should have told me from the start." He nodded slowly. "I know." She turned to walk away, then stopped. "Don't follow me." He didn't move. She left him there, kneeling in the grass. As the wind carried petals from the trees and the sky faded to violet, and with every step down that hill, her heart broke a little more. Because loving someone doesn't mean you should stay. The train station buzzed with quiet movement, footsteps on tiled floors, soft conversations, the distant whistle of an arriving engine. Mei stood near the edge of the platform, her fingers curled tightly around a small fabric bundle. Inside, carefully wrapped, was the paper crane he had made, and the photo she had once seen him hold beneath the moonlight. The same photo she had secretly placed back into his suitcase. A parting gift for a man who had never truly belonged. She didn't know if he'd come. She had left the message anyway, a simple note, left by the front door. "If you still plan to disappear, don't do it like last time." And now, the train hissed to a stop. Passengers stepped off. Others climbed aboard. Life moved forward, whether hearts were ready or not. Then she saw him, Chen Hao, no longer hiding as Li Wei walked slowly across the platform. He wore a plain gray coat, his duffel bag slung over one shoulder. His face was unreadable, but his eyes found hers instantly. No one spoke. They stood facing each other, inches apart, yet separated by the weight of everything unspoken. She handed him the bundle. He looked down at it, his throat moving. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. May's voice was quiet. "I wasn't sure I should." He nodded, his hands tightening around the bundle. "There's a place far from here, quiet, safe. I'm not going back to the people I used to work for. I'm done." She looked at him, her heart aching and full. "I hope that's true, it is." A pause. Then she asked, "Did any of it mean something to you? Or was it all survival?" He met her gaze. It meant everything. The train bell rang. He hesitated, then stepped forward, gently brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "I'll remember you for the rest of my life." Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away. "And I'll forget you. One day I have too." He didn't ask her to wait. She didn't ask him to stay. He turned, walked up the steps, and boarded the train. She stood there until the last car disappeared into the distance. And only then did she let herself cry, but not out of regret, out of release. Because sometimes love isn't about holding on. It's about letting go with grace. 2 years passed. The small village changed slowly. A few new homes. A newly painted schoolhouse. The same hills blooming with wildflowers every spring. May's hair was longer now, tied loosely behind her back. Her eyes a little softer, her smile more cautious. But her spirit remained steady. She now worked at the village clinic, tending to the elderly, helping new mothers, teaching children the names of herbs. Her days were full, her heart quiet. And beside her, always, a little boy with wide eyes and careful steps. His name was Yoon. He had her quiet nature, and his father's serious gaze. No one in the village asked where the boy came from. They knew not to. May had raised him with gentleness and truth, not the whole truth, but the kind that matters most. You are loved. You were never a mistake. One spring afternoon, she sat with Yoon in a small cafe on the edge of town. The boy sipped juice while scribbling in a sketchpad. May watched him fondly, the afternoon sun casting gold across the table. Then the bell over the door rang. She didn't look up at first, until a shadow fell across the floor, and a voice, quiet and familiar, said, "Is that lemon tea still your favorite?" Her breath caught. She turned. Chen Hao stood there, not as a ghost, not as a man on the run, but simply as himself. No duffel bag, no lies, just truth. He wore simple clothes, aged slightly, with tired eyes and a soft smile that broke her carefully built silence. Yoon looked up, curious. "Stir. Mama, who's that?" May stood slowly. Her heart pounded. He met her eyes. "I didn't come to take anything," he said. "Only to say thank you. And to ask if I could meet him." She looked at her son. Then at the man she had once loved, cared for, lost. And she saw not the past, but the man who had chosen to return. "Sit down," she said. He did. And, for the first time in years, they shared a table. Not as strangers, not as wounded people clinging to broken pieces, but as something entirely new, something real. Yun handed him the sketchpad. Chen Hao looked down. It was a drawing of a house, a tree, and 3 stick figures standing side by side. He smiled. "Ping. Is this us?" June nodded. "Maybe," he said. May didn't speak. But this time, she didn't need to. Because some stories don't end in goodbye. They end in return.